MPA.
Woo! Oh no,
Thank you.
that's not me.
I know the panel's here. Hello, MPA. Okay, a little bit more. All right, thank you, thank you. Thank you all for coming out to our panel. So I'm Dr. Wesselmann, social psychology professor at Illinois State University, organizer of today's panel on giving psychology away to the public in the 21st century. So it's becoming increasingly important that psychologists, academics, practitioners begin to engage the non-academic public more, right? So we get a lot of training on how to talk to other folks who are in academia, do research, etc. But getting training on actually engaging in folks to tell them why our work matters, to affect policy change, to convince people to fund us, right? These are things that we don't always get a lot of training in, at least at the PhD level. I certainly didn't. Organizations like Midwestern Psychological Association, Association for Psychological Science have begun to increase discussion of creating initiatives for us to do this more, and it's in that spirit that I have brought together a panel of experts who are not just experts in their topic areas, but are also expert communicators of science in different ways. I've had the pleasure of working with them in various capacities and being inspired by and learning from them. They all approach things in different ways, utilize the new technology in ways that I have no idea. Like I'm told there's this thing called Instagram, and I still don't know how it works yet, and maybe I'll learn. The way that we are going to progress today is I will give my colleagues a chance, just a minute or so, to kind of introduce themselves to you and what their area of expertise is. Then we will go through each individual, and I'm going to give them about 7 to 10 minutes to kind of be centered, and they will talk to you about some of the ways that they communicate to different interest groups about the research that they do. We'll have a few minutes for questions for them after that, some panel riffing. We'll progress through. One individual was not able to join us in person, but I've got a video for him that we'll show towards the end. So without further ado, we will have our first panelist, Dr. Apryl Alexander. So please join us. Oh, actually, sorry, crap. I discovered we're introducing ourselves one by one. I didn't move. Should I go? Yes, Dr.
Oh,
yes.
Okay.
I have not had enough time.
Hi, everyone. I'm short, so I'm going to stand up, actually. Good afternoon. I'm Dr. Vanessa Hintz. My pronouns are she and her. I'm a licensed clinical psychologist just west of Milwaukee in a town called Waukesha, Wisconsin. I teach at Carroll University. I'm also a diversity, equity, and inclusion consultant, professional, expert. I don't like to use that language, but I'm going to do it anyway because I'm just going to flex a little bit. Thank you all for being here. Appreciate it.
For those in the back, I'm Dr. Scott Jordan, aka Zombie Scotty. I'm a cognitive psychologist philosopher at Illinois State University, coming to you today as the one and only Dr. Edward Elric, professor of integrative alchemy studies at the University of Amestris. Does that work for anyone? If you understood the reference, raise your hand. Okay, Full Metal Alchemist, thank you very much. Delighted to be here.
I can't top that. I'm Dr. Shira, Gabriel. I use the pronouns she and her. I'm a professor of social psychology at the University at Buffalo.
Hi everyone, I'm Dr. Apryl Alexander, she, her pronouns. I'm a clinical and forensic psychologist by training, but now a professor in public health at UNC Charlotte.
I'm Justin Lehmiller. I'm a social psychologist and research fellow at the Kinsey Institute at Indiana University, and I run a business called Sex and Psychology, which aims to take the science of sex and relationships and translate it for the average person so that they can better understand it and hopefully use it to improve and enhance their own intimate lives.
Excellent. Thank you, esteemed panelists. Now, we're going to talk a little bit about it. Thank you.
All right, thank you everyone. Again, Dr. Apryl Alexander, currently a professor in public health sciences at UNC Charlotte. And in my talk, I wanted to talk a little bit about my engagement in public scholarship and hopefully inspire you all to also do the same work. So for a long time, social scientists, including psychologists, have been critiqued by the public for not having our research be accessible. If you were to look up one of our research articles online because you wanted to read it, you would probably be hit with a paywall. And this is often a problem for the public who often participates in our research as participants. They spend their time, maybe they get a $5 Amazon gift card, and then they can't read our research. If they were able to get access to it, it's often written in inaccessible ways that they can't understand. So for us, we need to be thinking about new ways to disseminate our scholarship so the public can actually access it. For those in this room who are academics, we also have to think about how we measure impact. When we look at promotion and tenure, it often weighs peer-reviewed journal articles, getting out those book chapters, but not emphasizing community-based methods, not emphasizing public scholarship to the larger community. So public impact scholarship is a relatively new term that has been used in other fields and disciplines to really reflect on how we get our scholarship out to the public in ways that they can consume it and be more accessible. Some of my colleagues and I, we participated in a public impact scholars program at the University of Denver, where they took faculty from across campus to teach them how to engage in public scholarship. So for a year, we had workshops on how to do media work, how to talk to legislators about our advocacy work, and just so much more on how we can better disseminate our work, our expertise, and such to the community. This might look like disseminating our work in a number of different ways. So do you have your own website or blog? So once you publish that article in a journal, being able to write a blog about it. Many of us are active on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram. So making sure that we are disseminating our work on those platforms which have a wider reach. Maybe it's podcasts, op-eds, books, TED Talks, all of these different ways that get to the community that is outside of a peer-reviewed journal article that just a few experts read. So for me, that's where my career has gone in recent years. That it all started in probably 2018. I saw my colleague, Dr. Kim Morgans, give a TED Talk in June of 2018, and I was like, wow, she's amazing. This being her second TED Talk with millions of people who've watched her TED Talk on issues related to traumatic brain injury. And it said, I'll never be on that stage. She gave them my name, and 6 months later, I was on the TEDx stage. Being able to share my work in working with adolescents in the legal system, lessons learned, and really campaigning for comprehensive sex ed, including consent education. With that, there were 5,000 people in the in-person audience for my TED Talk. In that 5,000 people, you never know who's in the audience. So in the weeks later, Planned Parenthood was in the audience. ACLU of Colorado was in the audience. And so they asked me to testify on a bill pertaining to comprehensive sex ed in the state of Colorado, telling me to share some of the things that I said in my TED Talk. That bill was successfully passed into law later that year. That is impact. That is change. So with that, paired with the Public Impact Fellowship, really learning, one, how I can get my scholarship out in a variety of different ways, whether it's news interviews with Nancy Grace, or writing op-eds in our paper. So the one example on there was Colorado had been impacted by several school shootings, including the STEM school shooting. Our governor had came to our university. It was a pre-planned meeting. And they had to ask him about how are you impacting school shootings, what policy changes are you needing to make? One of the first things that came out of his mouth was, I'm going to increase school resource officers. Not down for that. So I went home that evening, right after the talk, and in 30 minutes wrote a quick op-ed on why we need to reconsider that as policy, what our literature is saying about the criminalization of minoritized youth in schools, and how lack of mental health access is probably one of the factors that we need to be weighing if we're thinking about school safety. Again, these are ways that we can get our knowledge, our expertise, even our clinical experiences out to the public and the community. Legislative advocacy has been important in that work. I gave the example of the comprehensive sex ed bill, but before that, one of my first forays into legislative advocacy was on ending conversion therapy. I had moved to Colorado and had talked to some folks in the community, and I said, what advocacy efforts can I be involved in? And they said, we're still doing conversion therapy here. For those who don't know, conversion therapy is the unethical, unfounded practice of trying to change a person's gender identity or sexual orientation. And there were still licensed mental health practitioners doing that in Colorado. So there's me a week later after I had been asked. They said, can you come and testify? And I have trouble saying no, as people know. And so I said yes. And I had no experience in legislative testimony. We didn't even train ourselves in how to do that in grad school. So I had to do some Googling and learning and observing of others in the community. And again, there I am a week later. Unfortunately, the bill did not pass that year. It did not pass the following year when we showed up. So we had to do some outreach work with community, with advocacy partners, with social activists, and we finally got that passed into law years later. The other one up there is the Crown Act to end hair discrimination. Again, started in California, recognizing that we have young people who are displaced from the school system for having their hair in braids, locks, afros, or in other kind of indigenous styles. And again, being able to copy and paste that bill and bring it to Colorado and successfully pass that into law in 2019 as well. And again, what does psychology have to do with hair? Well, we have a lot of research on talking about the impact of discrimination and hate on a person's social identity, on a person's self-esteem if we're talking about young people, or even the school-to-prison pipeline, which I talked about in my testimony. It's not just doing these things myself. Again, as a professor, I want to train our students in how to engage in public scholarship. One of the ways that I've done that is I've created an assignment in one of my classes to get our students to write op-eds. These are opinion editorials that are written in your newspaper or local magazines, maybe even newsletters. 500 to 750 words to talk about a particular topic or issue. Similar to legislative testimony, anybody can write an op-ed. In fact, one of the op-eds I've written, it was published the same day as Donald Trump Jr., so anybody can write that op-ed. And so now I'm teaching my students how can we create op-eds based off of the work that you're doing, based off the issues that are important to you in the community. So we have this as an assignment in my class, and if you publish it during the course, you actually get a whole lot of extra credit. You basically can skip the final exam. So last year, the first year that I did this assignment, we had 2 people successfully publish their op-eds. Sometimes timing is important for op-eds, so a few students later got theirs published when it was a more relevant topic related to voting rights for incarcerated people. So this has been a great passion of mine of thinking about how we train students, scholars, anybody in this room on how do we get our, again, knowledge and expertise out to the community. And also being creative, we're going to have our other panelists, and again, my friends and colleagues talk about other ways that we do this, that really thinking about how do we reach out to the community about important messages that we have. So one of my areas especially is trauma-informed care and culturally informed practice. So thinking about all the lessons that we're learning from popular culture about the importance of diversity, the importance of representation, talking to people at Denver Comic-Con about post-traumatic growth as a concept. So it's been really fun to think about this as a way to engage in public scholarship as well. So I'd like to thank you all for having me and open to any questions.
Yes. First of all, you've done some amazing things. But I was wondering, in the era of misinformation, how can we reliably disseminate information through op-eds or blogs when anyone can post them? So I feel like that could be a double-edged sword. What do you recommend?
I think you just answered the question. This is why we need to engage in public scholarship. With this era of misinformation and disinformation, we have to have these counter narratives out there.
Yeah.
So I often tell my students, if you're not showing up to the Capitol, who has the voice for you? That often when I'm there talking about legislation, you have people from the public saying all sorts of icky things. For example, with the comprehensive sex ed bill, a person came to the Capitol with an adult toy and said, this is what they're going to teach our 5-year-olds because it has developmentally appropriate sex education. That's not developmentally appropriate sex education. How do you even get that in the Capitol? They search me all the time. And so that was the information those parents were getting about comprehensive sex ed. That's not true. So we, in our field, in our practice, we need to be there offering the counter narratives.
How do you how do they know they can listen to you over what their neighbor is saying or over
I think we have evidence,
Yeah.
we have science, we have peer-reviewed literature. So not only am I up there testifying, I'm going to give you a one-pager to go look at the peer-reviewed sources. I'm going to talk to the legislators beforehand. So again, this is a community collaboration in order to do this work and again position ourselves as the at least social science experts. I don't want to discount lived experience and those things as expertise as well. For maybe one?
Yes. Could you just briefly talk about the process of, at least for your students who are like beginner writers of op-eds, like how they actually were able to get those published?
Just thinking about, we need to make sure that our language is accessible. So first, we often write a policy analysis that's written in our technical language. And they say, are we writing it in a way that's going to be accessible to the community? So I have you highlight it in Word and look at the reading level. What's the average reading level of most Americans? Around 6th grade. That's just the truth. So thinking about, are we making this accessible? Are we making sure we reduce jargon when we can? And so starting that process out first. Then for any newspaper, you can go online right now, hit the opinion column or section, and see what their criteria are. So again, anywhere from 500 to 750 words, and you just hit submit. Yes, you can also build relationships with the media and press. So anywhere where I've moved, I go onto Twitter, start looking for people at the local newspapers and start following if I like their work. So also doing their research on who's doing the criminal justice beat, who's doing the education beat, what types of things are they writing about so they can see me as an expert. And again, they often follow me back because they want to hear from us. So making those connections and getting the work out there. Let's talk more too. Anything else? All right, thank you.
Okay, please welcome our next guest, Dr. Shira Gabriel.
That was amazing, right? That was like so inspiring. I want to get out there and do important things. This is great. I'm going to talk at a little bit more of a micro level about just ways to get your work out there and talk to people about what's going on in your lab and some tips for doing that. I communicate with the media a lot about my work just because I do the kind of work that interests, like I study things like people watching TV and going to concerts. So it's something that the general lay audience is interested in. So I have a lot of experience communicating it with it. So hopefully some of it will be relevant if you end up with those experiences. So I think we've talked a little bit here about why it's important to share our ideas. So why would you want to talk to the media or get your stuff out there? Well, one reason is that a lot of you are doing really important, really interesting work that is worth sharing with more than just the people who read the journals. So basically the other people in this room. You want to be able to share those things with more folks, and that's one important reason to do it. You might want to do it because you feel like there's something that's missing in the discourse out there that your science informs, and you want people to be able to learn about that. You just generally want to be a part of advancing science, so our science won't advance as much as it can unless we get word out there to other folks about what's going on. There are very loud voices in the world sharing all kinds of information. And so we should be out there sharing the kind of information that we have as well. Sometimes these things can bring new opportunities, so I have never really talked to the media with those thoughts in mind, but they have happened to me where groups have read about my research in the media and then come to me and said, like, we think that the kind of processes that you're explaining are happening within our organization, and we'd like for you to study them, and we've been able to write up grant proposals and stuff. So there is sometimes an opportunity that comes from sharing things in a broader way. And you may just want your relatives to know what you do. And so it's often very hard for all of us to explain, like, not a clinical psychologist, I don't see patients, and you tell your family that over and over, and then they're like, so how are things with your patients? How's your practice? And it's like, still not doing that. And so it's very hard, as we know, as psychologists, to get people to understand that there's more than one way to be a psychologist. And so I think that this can be really helpful because you can share it with your aunt and be like, look, this is actually what I do. And she'll be like, between patients? Is that what you do? One way to do this is through blog posts, and a nice way to do it is that you can control that. Anybody can write a blog post, and you may be able to do it through your association's website. So for example, if you're a member of SPSP, if you're a social and personality psychologist, we have an outlet called Character and Context, which is a means to try and communicate findings within our field to a lay audience. I was an editor there for a while, and what we would do is the three of us editors basically divided up all of the journals, and we would read through for things that seemed like a broad audience would want to know. Then I would contact people and be like, could you write a piece for us about this paper that you have? And I would say, write it like for your aunt, like without jargon. And then 99% of the time I would get it back and be like, you know, is your aunt like Skinner or something? Because it's just not something anyone will understand. We are all so used to our jargon that we've forgotten that it's jargon, and we start putting it in our things. So it's a good process to do, to work with your whatever your organization is, to put things out and learn how to communicate them, how to take a step back from all you've learned about being good scientists and to communicate it that way. You can also, if you don't want to do that, you have something to say, anyone can post something on Medium or other places like that. I did that. I wanted to say something about people being kinder to each other in academia and giving positive feedback, and so I wrote it on Medium, and just, I'm extraordinarily old, so I only have Facebook, so I shared it there. But other people shared it and ended up getting read thousands and thousands of times, and so anyone can do that too. That's a nice way, if you just feel like, wow, I want people to hear this one thing. You also, if you don't have websites of your own, can contact friends or colleagues who do have websites that lots of people read. So there's one in social psychology called Sometimes I'm Wrong that has a big readership that deals with methodological issues, and I felt like I had something I wanted to communicate about that. And so I wrote to the person who writes it and said, would it be okay if I did a guest post? And she was like, sure. People want content, and contact. Yeah, but that's a different talk.
That's what else.
So maybe you want to do interviews. Maybe you want to communicate with the press. How do you go about doing that if you haven't done it before? One thing you can do if you're with a college is you can do a university press release. So you, believe it or not, have a university press office, and you can contact them. They'll be extraordinarily pleased that someone actually went to them instead of them having to reach out, and tell them I wrote this paper and I'd like it to get out there, and they will help you write or write themselves a press release for you, and they'll send it out for you, and sometimes those can get picked up. So the Associated Press picked up one that was written about my research, and then it ended up in thousands of places, or people may see it and then contact you and say, we want to interview you about what you're doing. You also can get listed on your college or university website as an expert, so you can contact your university and say, these are things I can talk to the press about, and they'll put you up there, and then people will contact you and say, you know, I'm with Time Magazine and I'm writing an article about belongingness. Can we interview you for it? Give some thought to whether you do want to be interviewed for that. So don't just take any interview you get. Sometimes someone will contact you, and make sure you know where they're writing it for, and if they have like an angle, and whether you want to be a part of that. That's one I can tell you to think hard about. If you're doing interviews, now what are some good tips? Remember, they're only going to take a teeny portion of what you say, so you may talk to someone for an hour, and then they'll pull one quote. And it's always going to be the one quote that you're like, oh God, why is the whole world seeing that? So try to avoid saying that one thing that they're trying really hard to get you to say if you don't want to say it. Because then it'll be like the one thing that everybody knows that you said, even though it's not exactly what you do. So I mentioned in one of my initial things on collective effervescence that like I used to go see a lot of fish shows in my 20s, and then that was like the headline of the whole thing is like, a career following fish leads this professor to an area of study. So I was like, great, now all my students think, you know, yeah. So be careful. This is a very minor thing, but wear solid colors like that. You look beautiful. That would be perfect, like a nice blue shirt with a black blazer. If you wear something busy, then it distracts people. If you do this in your home, pick a good location. The whole world may see whatever's going on behind you. Try to have fun with it. You're going to do best, and you're going to get more opportunities, and more people are going to hear about your work if you have a good time and you're relaxed in the whole thing. Try not to talk beyond your data. They will want you to talk beyond your data. They're going to push you really hard to say really broad things. Don't do it. You don't have to say anything that you don't want to. And then the last question I'll ask you, for those of you that have never done an interview with the press, the last thing that they'll always ask you is there anything that you want me to know that I didn't ask you about? So think about that ahead of time. go into the interview with like, I want to make sure that people know this. Like mine is always like, I want people to know that there are many ways to belong and that all of them are okay, and you shouldn't feel bad if you don't want to get married or you don't like going to parties, you can still be happy. So if they don't ask me that, I have that ready at the end. They will ask you that, so think about it. What is the one thing I want people to know, and say it at the end? And once in a while, they'll actually use it. Ask them to send you links to it when they post it. 50% of the time they actually will do this, because sometimes things will get posted days later, but sometimes it'll be a really long time later and then you won't see it. So these are just some pragmatic tips that I have from having had experience doing this sort of thing. I encourage all of you to approach ways to do this. There are so many amazing people doing great science, and again, there are many voices filling up the internet with all kinds of things, and it's really essential that our voices be out there too. So I hope that you guys are thinking about doing that, and don't feel sheepish about it. I did at first. I was like, aren't we scientists supposed to stay away from the popular media and from doing stuff? Maybe that's a generational thing. Maybe you guys don't have that, but I did. And if you do, then it's fun and good, and your aunt will finally learn that you aren't just seeing clients all day. Thank you.
Welcome our next guest, Dr. Vanessa Hintz.
All right, thank you all. So brevity is not my strong suit, so I'm really gonna try to I'm gonna time myself, I'm gonna stay on task, because I just talk too much. See, I'm already started. So my name again is Dr. Vanessa Hintz. I use she, her pronouns, and I actually was thinking about how to approach this, because I feel very much not like an expert, or not like I know what I'm doing, and so I'm like, how am I gonna tell anybody else what they should do? So I thought that I would just tell you my story and how I got to where I am today. So that's exactly what I'm gonna do. I'm gonna tell you my origin story as a professional. And so I am a licensed clinical psychologist, but I did not come to psychology on any straight and narrow path. I actually have a bachelor's degree in computer science, and I went to the University of Louisville, and about 75% of the way through my computer science program, I realized I hated it with a fiery passion. I hated it. And I didn't know what I was going to do. I just spent all this money in college. I got this degree that I'm not going to be able to use. Neither one of my parents have a 4-year degree, and so they were like, oh, I don't know what you're going to do either. And so I literally didn't know what I was going to do. Spent the summer doing some soul searching, watching some documentaries about serial killers, like we do, and realized I wanted to be a psychologist. At first I thought I was going to be like a criminal profiler, like B.D. Long on Law and Order SVU. But I knew the government wouldn't hire me to do that. And so I was like, I want to be a psychologist. And my ego said, you're going to go all the way to the top. You're going to be a doctor. Because nobody else in my family is. And I knew that was going to be my ego said yes. And so as someone who did not have any experience in psychology before coming to graduate school, I actually went to graduate school right around the corner at the Chicago School of Professional Psychology. So coming back here is a very nostalgic. It was like super emo for me last night. But I'm a millennial. I'm a biracial black woman. My mom is white and my dad is black. And again, I have grown into something that was absolutely influenced by all of these experiences, and feeling like from day one in the space of psychology that I didn't belong. Because I didn't have the knowledge, and because I didn't see very many people who looked like me, even in the great city of Chicago, right? Like I went to a school that was not necessarily as diverse as you would think the city would allow, right? And so in my early professional experiences, I experienced all of these things that I now understand to be inequity. But at the time, I was just like, damn, this is whack. Like we're paying all of this money. I'm paying all of this money, and I'm not happy. I feel like I'm just doing the next thing. You're putting one foot in front of the other. Do your dissertation, do your practicum, go on internship, just one foot in front of the other, without necessarily stopping to think about why and what was important to me, like what I value. Like grad school, you all know, for people who are in the space, who have been there or are going there, I won't scare you, and it's a lot. Like it's a situation. Like it's a whole situation. And you sort of add on to that student loan debt, and I was in the city of Chicago without knowing a soul. Like I moved here from Louisville after growing up in Vegas, and I literally knew no one. And so it was just a very transformative experience for me, and again, all of these things I experienced in my grad school program, which again, that's no shade. I would recommend people go to the Chicago School. And I now understand that psychology and graduate school programs are wrought with inequity, just like the world largely, right? And so for me, I didn't have a name for it then, I do now, but I experienced all of these things which led me to have all of these feelings of imposterism. And again, feeling as if I didn't belong. I didn't know what I was going to do with my life. When I finally graduated, not finally, I graduated on time. When I graduated and got my license, it was like, okay, now what? Because there was no more next thing. There was no more like, okay, do this, do this, do this. And so I didn't know what to do. And it was through community, actually, that I started and on my journey. When I say journey to healing, it's healing those wounds of imposterism, right? Healing those wounds of feeling as if I don't belong, which even right now, like I feel like I shouldn't be up here. I feel like I'm up here because Eric knew me. You know what I'm saying? Like I got it in that way. And I'm still in this process of challenging those thoughts and inviting myself to sort of live in my truth and be okay with that, right? And so the way that I have started to do that is by externalizing these inequities, right? Like imposterism is not about me, it's about the system, right? What the system will have you believe though is that like I'm weak because I don't believe in myself, or I'm this or I'm that. And so I've really started to externalize a lot of those things, which I promise there's a point to this. And the point is that all of the work that I do in sharing psychology with the public is to be what I didn't have, is to help people to do that for themselves, right? And I just help to invite people to do that for themselves, to be in collaboration and community with people in ways that raise awareness about this yourself, about your worth, about who you are, right? Like who you are right now in this moment is good enough. And everything that I do, I want to communicate that, right? I want to be actively resistant to the inequities in the world, right? We don't just say like, I'm not racist and that's enough, right? I want to be actively resistant. I want to engage people with humility, and I want to build community. And so all of those things, again, I promise there's a point, have influenced the work that I do now. And so I am pleased to say that I eventually have found the lane that I want to be in as a professional. I'm still figuring it out. And I think that I have found a way to be and share with people that is most congruent to me, and that is through, I'm a clinician, right? And so I don't do therapy anymore. Now I teach and train. I don't like the word train. Training is for animals. I help people as they're getting their own degrees and becoming therapists, right? And so as a clinician, again, I want to be someone who sort of speaks that power into people. Because again, I want to be what I wish I had, right? I'm an existentialist, which I know some people will roll their eyes at that. Yeah, okay, I see you in the back. But I'm an existentialist, and I think it makes everything that I just said easier, because everything I just said to me is like an existential line of thought. And again, I do equity and inclusion work, and so what that looks like is that, and nobody taught me how to be a consultant, I just said I was, and that was fine. But I use not only everything that I just told you all about myself, my lived experience and my understanding about dynamics of power and identity and all of these different things, I use that in the work that I do as a consultant to help businesses or to help educators or to help clinicians engage in a way that is more equitable. And I elected to do this way because you have everything you need to go do what you want to do. That's what I want to communicate, right? Like you have everything you need, even expertise. And Dr. Alexander referenced this, right? Like expertise comes in many different forms. And I think your number one expertise is your lived experience, because you're the expert on you, right? And I will also say, she sort of references too, okay? Like we nerdy up in here, and the way that I have sort of worked to build community and really sort of give psychology away is at fan conventions, at comic conventions, at popular conventions. I go and I talk about stuff in rooms full of people that don't know nothing about psychology, right? But in those spaces, we can talk about the things that they love in a way that promotes empowerment. That is my goal. That is absolutely my goal. I have a podcast, and I didn't want to say that because everybody and their mama got a podcast, and some of them are not good, and I didn't want to just be another person that has a podcast, and my podcast is tight. Because I essentially talk about everything that I'm talking with you all about now, and nobody taught me how to start a podcast. I just did it because I felt like I had something to say. Y'all know I'm talking a lot. I talk a lot, right? And so I talk about popular culture, again, in a way that is rooted in empowerment and building of community. And the last thing I'll say, and I promise I think I'm on time, is it's also important to me as a Black woman to unabashedly experience joy in a world that tells us that we don't matter and that we don't get to do that. And in a capitalist society where you gotta work to earn joy, it's important for me to, as a whole professional, a whole academic, somebody's whole life, to be out here living my best nerdy life. Y'all see how I make African American? Who's tired? But it's important for me, and again, that is part of how I share psychology and share that with the world, right? Like this matters. This matters. It doesn't give me income, it still matters though. And so with that, thank you all so much.
Alrighty, now for our next guest, my favorite alchemist, Dr. Edward Elric, also known as Dr. Scott Jordan.
Thank you very much. I'm going to set myself up so I can time myself so I don't go over. Alright, there we go. I'm absolutely delighted to be here. I'd like to thank Dr. Wesselmann for inviting me to be on this panel and for my amazing co-panelists to give me a spot where I can talk about these things. Dr. Wesselmann mentioned we have difficulty communicating with the rest of the world. Part of that is because of how we and the Western world think about what we are and what we live in. We tend to think of ourselves as physical systems with minds or physical systems with souls. And that basic dualism is lived by 20% of the world's population. The rest of the world's population experiences itself in a more indigenous way. So what I do is I talk about a thing called wild systems theory. It's what I do in my career. I'm an experimental psychologist with a very nasty philosophical bent. I have a very difficult time with dualisms. A lot of German philosophers taught us that dualisms were indications of a problem in need of resolution, not a solution. So this dialectic has kept me working for quite a while. The question I ask here is, what if it's the case that we're not physical or mental? What if it's the case that we're energy? Okay, that's not crystal reading in Sedona in the middle of the night. I'm serious here. Because there's a guy named Odom who said that we live in an energy transformation hierarchy. The sun is consumed by plants, converts into chemical energy, which is consumed by herbivores, which converts it into biological energy, which is consumed by carnivores, which is then consumed by credit card companies. Now, that last part may sound funny, but that's the point. Is your money is your energy. And the minute you don't think about it that way, someone's going to take it from you. All right. So wild systems recursively scale up. In other words, neurons that fire together, wire together. What that means is that the actual work, the energy release of being a neuron keeps that neuron alive. We are much better thinking of ourselves as plants than as thinking of ourselves as computers. And we can talk about that more if you like, but I think if we think about ourselves as plants, no one ever sees a wilting plant and says, damn, you just need to work harder. Right? What they say is that plant needs some water, that plant needs some sun, right? So if we think about ourselves as plants of energy transformers, we get ourselves closer to that idea. And as we scale up from neurons to neural networks to brains to bodies to groups to cultures, every level has its own boundary it needs to generate from its work to be a system. So bounding, creating boundaries, what I'll call othering, is a fundamental property of what we are from the level of the single cell to the level of the culture. I say these things because then it lets us come to grip with the fact that we got all kinds of things we're doing all the time and don't even know it. You guys, most of you in here probably can't tickle yourselves. People that are diagnosed as schizophrenia are more likely to be able to tickle themselves. The reason is because they don't generate identity boundaries like you do all the time. Your memories are constantly flushed into your cortex. Any fMRI study that measures cortex is looking at a whole ton of memory. Right? Every one of you has at least two voices in your head right now. The one you're letting me so kindly put in there, and then your own that says, damn, he's right. That ability to actually separate what's going on in you from what's not due to you is the foundational psychological othering necessary to be a someone. So, how do I share this with the world? Why does it matter? Well, I just jumped into it, right? We saw former President Trump go on public television and make ad hominem statements about a woman who had testified in Kavanaugh's Supreme Court hearings and accused him of sexual harassment. Now, I'm a state employee. I'm not supposed to talk about politics. Ad hominem statements don't qualify as politics. Being mean is not politics. So I said, my people, meaning I'm a department chair, we got to have the opportunity to say something that's not anti. You can be anti that, but that always has that in it. What about being pro? So I said, let's be pro-empathy. So I sent out an email to the department. Within a week, we had half of the department in a meeting. That first year, we put on 10 talks. Now, this is pre-COVID, so like we were with each other in the same room. Next year, we did 4, and then COVID came to close things down, right? So the year after that, we went online. And we set up a series of talks on Zoom that led to the final talk that commemorated the centennial of the Tulsa Massacre. We don't know who's watching. You gotta make a choice. You either sing or you don't. You either do it or you don't. It's like someone asks you about when you do a blog, when you find the time to sing, right? And if you're gonna sit there and not do it, as for the other people, well, that's not gonna get as far as you'd like. COVID happened in 21-22. We didn't do much in the extended empathy project that month. However, the next year, last year, we did a little talk for what they call Mornings with Professors. We did a 4-part series, Trust 101, who to keep in, who to keep out. I know that doesn't sound like a pleasant title, but I guarantee you, how many of you know someone you would not let into your home or your apartment? All right, so we're all keeping people out. So let's just start there, okay? And start with the fact that we're managing our vulnerability every day of our lives. So if we look at that, how do we then look at empathy? All right, I jumped there. So what we're doing this year is Trust 101 on Zoom. We collaborated with the American Democracy Project. We've given 6 of our talks already. We got another one coming up in a week and a half. The final one will be given on Juneteenth. That QR code will take you to our webpage. There'll be more QR codes at the end for stuff I talk about, so if you don't get it right now, that's fine. There's also a thing I do on YouTube called Dark Roots Productions. Basically, it's a podcast where I talk about science, philosophy, lived life, and what I try to emulate is a good old-fashioned after-dinner conversation among sophisticated adults, where we can hear people disagree and swim with each other's ideas instead of trying to tell each other we're wrong. And so much of what we hear now is judgmental and binary. And for some reason, thank God my brain doesn't do binaries. So I just keep doing this and we keep the conversation going on forever. I'll do stuff on science, I'll do stuff on comic books, I'll do stuff on TV series. I just recently started a series with a group of scholars from India. They wanted to know something about wild systems theory, so we call it Systems Gone Wild. Basically, they read a paper, I talk with them, and they let me record it, and I post it. Is the world going to listen to an hour and a half of this? Well, I'm going to make sure it's out there. The counter-narrative idea, you can't let someone else tell you what to think, or you can, but you also got your own story. So get your story out there. Anybody seen Netflix live action One Piece? If you haven't seen it, I highly recommend it. Got together with a group of people. We podcasted, we talked about it. We get to talk about relationships. We get to talk about intergenerational relationships, which is something this culture does not handle well at all. And we get to do so in this authentic thing where I'm not saying, I'm the psychologist, you're going to listen to me, because I know not all these people are psychologists. But we're having a multi-scale, open conversation, which I think the world is sorely missing right now. And then we take this to the road. So just this last weekend, we went to a little thing in Decatur, Illinois. It may look like we're just having fun. I gotta tell you though, these 2 little kids here had the day of their lives. Little boy picked up the mic, we're talking about One Piece, and he says, hey, what do you guys think about Spider-Man? And it's like, okay, this is an after-dinner conversation. You can change the topic right in with you. So we talked about Spider-Man for a little while. Little man got up with the microphone, and he's trying to look all sophisticated, and someone says, God, he's just modeling what we're doing. Think about that. He had never seen or had the opportunity to be in that space and try to talk that way. Excuse me. What other cosplays I do? I love to cosplay Wicked Old White Man. And you can actually cosplay the Purple Man from Jessica Jones with purple makeup. I took hell for that one.
Yes, I do.
But why do it? Man, you just walk around and you're a conversation. And people talk about it. And Jessica Jones is one of the best Marvel stories that there is. Right? So I love doing this. I do a little podcast one at these times called What You Love. I ask people 3 questions. What you love, how do you find it, and how do you keep it in your daily life? Because I want people to learn that love is work. Love don't just happen, it's work. And so these people tell us about the love and the work they have to do to keep this cosplay vibe in their lives. The Expanse, if you haven't watched The Expanse, Lord have mercy, it's the best EDIA show on television. Ted Lasso, what can I say? Again, another show that allows us to talk about relationships. And then the Rise of the Trickster, that's me doing the dude in New Orleans. That's why the hat's there. This is a multicultural panel on what tricksters are across various cultures. And my drop the mic moment is when I tell you, you are all tricksters, because you are all embodied chaos. Why is anime so good as a character? If you're not watching anime, I highly recommend it. I do a thing in Illinois State called ReggieCon, where we celebrate History Heritage Month being celebrated that month with a discussion of a graphic novel that's on Zoom. It's open to the public. We usually get a writer or a creator in there. This is the most recent one we did on Vipapada, which was celebrating Arab American Heritage Month. And then our next ReggieCon will be on May 2nd. We'll get the One Piece group celebrating Asian American Pacific Islander Heritage Month. ReggieCon Live is coming up in about a week. And if you want to know what that is, basically of all these talks going on, QR codes will be up here, and I've got a piece of paper you can have it if you like. I'll have the code on it. And this is a conference we're doing during that thing. Those are my QR codes. That's the Wild Systems Theory. That's why I do this. Thank you very much. When I cosplay Edward Elric, I invite people to write in my book called Your Truth, in which they simply take a moment to write their truth, and I tell them if they put their name and contact information here when I publish this, which I will, I'll put their name, if I can get away with it legally. If they want to. Anybody here wants to write their truth in my book, you're more than welcome. Questions? Yeah, what the hell is that? Thank you very much. Thank you.
Welcome our next speaker, Dr. Justin Lehmiller.
Hi, it is great to be here, and I'm going to be speaking with you about building an entire career in science communication. So public engagement is something that you can do as part of an academic career. It's an important thing we can do, as we've learned from the other panelists, in terms of how to help get the public more informed and knowledgeable about our work, also help to inform public policy. But scientific communication is something you can also do as a career in and of itself, as I found out accidentally. I'll tell you a little bit more about that. But it's also something you can do to build and support another type of business that you might have. So for example, if you're a practicing therapist, engaging in public science communication can be a way of growing and building your therapeutic practice. So there's all different kinds of things that you can do with this. It's important for a lot of reasons. And like I said, it can be a whole career unto itself if you find yourself knee-deep in it. So let me tell you a little bit about my professional journey. So I was a full-time college professor for 10 years. And when I left graduate school, I thought that that's what I was going to do my entire life, because I was only trained literally to do that one thing. And so to my advisor's great surprise, I did not just stay in it and ended up leaving a few years later to go off and do something very different. But the basis for me doing that was that when I was a college professor, I was teaching a lot of large human sexuality courses, and semester after semester I would find that my students had all of these questions about sex that showed that they didn't really know all that much about their own bodies. They didn't know that much about how to stay sexually safe or healthy. They didn't know a lot about how to communicate with partners or to build healthy and satisfying relationships. And it just hit me that these hundreds of students that I'm teaching per year are just a microcosm of the broader population, and how maybe there's more that can be done, how I can take this education that I'm doing and expand beyond the walls of the classroom. So some of my academic siblings from graduate school had started a website called The Science of Relationships, and they invited me to write a couple of blog posts for them about some research on sex and relationships, and I found that I really liked and enjoyed doing that, and that it was a way to take the work, get it out there, and have it read by a much wider audience. So I ended up starting my own blog called Sex and Psychology, where I could just focus on what I wanted to focus on. But then that led to opportunities to start writing for larger media outlets. So I was living in Boston at the time. I was teaching at Harvard University, and the Boston Globe contacted me to sort of be their sex expert and wanted me to write some columns for them on sex. This turned into other things later. So later I became a columnist for Playboy. And I know a lot of people look at Playboy as a source of entertainment, titillation, and it was a chance for me to really bring sex education to that audience, to write articles about what can we do to reduce rates of sexual assault, what can we do to teach people what they need to know about how sexual consent works and operates. So I was able to take work that I was doing that was really important and put it in some of these mainstream publications, kind of as a form of stealth sex education. Eventually, this all led to literary agents contacting me saying, hey, you should write a whole book, which was not on my radar, but people seemed to like what I was writing, and so I ended up writing a book. And by the time that was about to come out, I was effectively working 2 full-time jobs. I had my full-time day job as a professor and spending the rest of my time writing for magazines and newspapers, writing a book, and being very active on social media, publishing on sex research that was coming out every day. And I had to make a choice as to what I really wanted to do with my career, because it was just too much to do both of these things. And so I decided to leave and start my own business, because my passion was really in that scientific communication piece. So about 6 years ago, I started a business called Sex and Psychology, which has the goal of taking the science of sex and relationships and translating it in a way that can improve our knowledge about sex and relationships, to dispel common myths and misconceptions, and to help people improve and enhance their own intimate lives. The business that I run today is very multifaceted, and none of the things that I'm doing did I ever think I would be doing, and I never had any training in how to do any of this. It's just all things that I learned and started doing along the way. And it was a valuable realization to me to know that the skills that you're taught in graduate school are transferable to things other than just being a college professor. There's a lot of things that you can do with that skill set. So as part of my business, I run a blog and a podcast. The podcast comes out twice a week. Usually I publish on the blog about once a week, about recent research, sex science, sex education. I also write books and textbooks. So I have a textbook on human sexuality, it's in the 3rd edition. I have a book called Tell Me What You Want. It's all about the science of sexual fantasies. I'm working on another book right now. I do a lot of media writing for media outlets, a lot of interviews and TV appearances. I was actually in New York City last week to film an appearance on The Daily Show, which I don't know when it's going to come out. It's going to be very fun, so keep an eye out. I also do a lot of public speaking and workshops, so I get invited to give lectures in different places. I teach study abroad courses on sex and culture for practicing therapists who want to broaden their multicultural perspective. So next month we're going to Amsterdam and Berlin for these courses on sex and culture, and I'm taking a group of, I think it'll be somewhere between 50 and 60 sex therapists from around the world who want to learn more about sex in cultural context. I also consult with sexual health and wellness companies. I work with sex toy companies, with lube companies. It turns out that these sexual health and wellness companies, really, in order to get people to know about their products and to be comfortable engaging with them, they have to be in the business of sex education. And they have to break down barriers and taboos to talking about sex just to get people to engage with their products. So I do a lot of consulting work with these companies, also with dating apps. And I also work as an expert witness in sex crime cases. So my expertise in human sexuality gets me called into the courtroom sometimes to basically be a sex educator for judges and juries, which was something I never expected to be doing, and it's probably the single most stressful part of my job, but it's fascinating. So I do a lot of different stuff, and I take sex education and put it in a whole bunch of different contexts to educate different audiences that need to know about the science of sex. So, like I said, I'm kind of self-taught with all of this stuff, and my graduate program gave me absolutely no training in scientific communication beyond just writing journal articles. It actually gave me no training in teaching either. I had to learn how to do all that on my own. So I often get asked by students and people who are going into the field, well, how can I get the job that you have, or how can I do what you're doing? And so what I tell them is that you're probably going to need to chart your own course. So these are the things that I kind of wish I would have known early on that would have been helpful so that I didn't have to reinvent the wheel for everything that I do now. So part of it starts with seeking out relevant learning opportunities, attending workshops, events at conferences, just going where you can get those skills and training that you might need to do what it is that you want to do. Also, if you're applying to graduate schools, you might consider looking at an applied program. For example, an applied social psychology program. Well, maybe you'll get more training in how to do things other than just be a college professor. Also, while you're in graduate school, you have the opportunity to pursue a number of electives. You can do a minor. This was a totally missed opportunity for me. I didn't think about what are the other things I could be learning while I was in graduate school because I was so focused just on social psychology. But if you're interested in science communication, IO psych, business, public health are all relevant fields that could give you a different perspective and help you build up other skill sets. Also, find non-academic mentors. So odds are your college professors won't know a lot about scientific communication. My graduate advisor, in fact, told me I shouldn't ever talk to the media because he had had some bad experiences doing so. And so I was kind of discouraged from doing that. Not only just discouraged from it, but not given any kind of advising on how to actually do this kind of thing. So find mentors outside of your department. That can just include writing people who are doing what it is that you want to be doing. And they may not be able to commit to some multi-year mentorship project with you, but they might be able to at least provide you with some advice or guidance on what you need to do, things you can do to help build and refine the skills that you need. Also consider an internship. A lot of programs will allow you to do one of these, and you can go out and actually get real-world experience. And sometimes you just don't know what opportunities are out there unless you go seek them out. So internships can be a great way to sort of get some of that hands-on experience of actually taking science and seeing it put into practice. Networking, of course, is also super important. This can involve joining societies or online groups, attending conferences and events. I know that finances can be a big issue when you're in graduate school, so the online groups can be a particularly valuable resource for still building up that networking, because in a lot of this, it's about who you know. And it's, so for example, with media opportunities, if somebody's going to reach out to you to serve as an expert on something, how are they going to know who you are? And they're not going to know who you are unless you make yourself known in some way, and so networking is really an important part of that. It's also important to establish yourself as an expert in your area. And I know I don't love the term expert either, as many people don't like, especially the term sexpert, which often gets applied to me as well. But as we've discussed, anybody can call themselves an expert. It's a meaningless title, it's not a legally protected title. But you need to be seen in the eyes of others as an expert if you are going to be called on to, for example, testify in a court case, or to make a television appearance, or to get media interviews talking about the science of psychology. So it's important, I think, in establishing your credibility, is another way to think of it, is to have your academic expertise and your media expertise. So both of these feed into one another. I wouldn't have the media and other opportunities that I have if I didn't have the academic credentials. And so if I hadn't been a college professor first for many years, I wouldn't be able to do what I'm doing because having a long publication record, having the PhD credentials, these other sorts of things is really important in getting these other opportunities because we know in psychology people rely on heuristics. And so when they're publishing a quote or something, they're going to say who it's from and what your credentials are, and that's an important part of how they decide who they're going to interview for various things. So your degrees, credentials, certifications, publications, all that stuff is important in establishing this, but you also need to have the media expertise too. And so it's important to have some type of online presence that shows your skill set. Everybody has a different skill set, and maybe it could be in the form of a podcast, maybe it's in the form of a blog, it could even be in the form of social media. Social media has been a big part of how I engage the public, and literally every single day for the last 12 years, first hour starts with publishing a whole bunch of social media posts and scheduling them throughout the day on a bunch of different platforms. And it takes a long time for those social media profiles to grow, but it can be a great way of sort of establishing that presence and being noticed. And also it turns out that social media presence can actually be a very big avenue now into getting book deals and writing opportunities in media. So don't underestimate the importance and power of social media in all of this. You can also start writing for media outlets to start curating a collection of bylines. A lot of this in the early days starts with you just writing a pitch and sending it to a media outlet, or writing an op-ed and sending it out and seeing if you get any hits or bites. You'll have a lot of times where people will pass on it, and that's okay, it happens. Rejection is just as big a part of media writing as it is from academic writing, and we're all very used to rejection from academic writing, so this is no different. It just comes a lot faster, right? It doesn't take several months for you to get your rejection if it happens. But that helps to start building your profile and the experience. Also, pitch yourself for media opportunities. So you can pitch yourself as a guest to go on podcasts. Not on the big name ones at first, but just by starting out. There are literally millions of podcasts out there. Pitch yourself as a guest for some of them, what you can talk about, as a chance to sort of build up that skill in interviewing and just learning how to communicate. It's practice. These things take a lot of time to develop. Just a few other quick tips and tricks. Be sure to leverage your personal strengths. Everybody's different in terms of how they're most effective at science communication. Some of us are better writers, some of us are better speakers, some of us are really technologically gifted and great with social media and creating graphics. So lean into your strengths. I think you can also open more doors by becoming a generalist as opposed to a specialist in a very narrow area. It's not to say that you can't be a specialist, and I know in graduate school they try to get you to be a specialist in a very narrow area, and I'm kind of giving you counter advice to that. But if you're going to be a specialist and be engaged in a lot of scientific communication, it's important that that specialty is one that's broadly applicable or that is going to generate a lot of interest. So for example, if you were a sex and relationship researcher and your focus was infidelity, that's a narrow focus, but you can make a whole career out of that because it's a topic that's not going away anytime. Also recognize that all of this takes time. It doesn't happen overnight. It took me many years to kind of get to where I was so that I could be running this as its own full-time business. And if you wanted to start out right away from graduate school, just getting into scientific communication, it's important to have some secondary career that you can use to pay the bills as you're doing this, or something that's going to work synergistically with it. So if you're a therapist, maybe you're a 3/4 time therapist and the other quarter of the time is in science communication, media presence, and all of that can come back to support the therapy business and so forth. So there are all different kinds of ways you can come at this, but there's so much that you can do with a career in scientific communication. So a little bit about me if you want to connect with me on social media or follow my website or blog at sexandpsychology.com. So thanks for your time. Happy to answer any questions. Any question?
First of all, thank you so much. This is just such important research and really interesting and important. So, kind of general question. So obviously, sexuality is highly stigmatized. So how do you decide what to talk about? How explicit with each media outlet you're talking about? So writing for Playboy, for instance, is different than writing for the New York Times. In how you balance how you talk about sex.
Yeah, it's a great question. I would say actually the trickiest thing is talking about sex on social media because it's very easy to get shadow banned or censored even for saying the word sex, which is why a lot of sex educators will say segs, S-E-G-G-S instead. I can't bring myself to do it, so I might be undercutting my own social media presence by not self-censoring. But yeah, I would say social media is the hardest, but in terms of some of the other outlets, it is a tricky balance between being scientifically accurate and writing in an engaging way, but not also writing it in a way that's too fun, if you will, that ends up trivializing the topic. So it's a delicate balancing act, and I only found my voice in writing this through years of practice in writing and getting feedback from other people. So when I first started my blog, for example, I actually had my husband read every single article I wrote before I published it. He was super annoyed by that. But it was like, I need to make sure that people can understand this and also that it sounds okay to somebody else who's not, a colleague in my area. So getting that outside feedback, I think, is really helpful for me. But also, you kind of need to write for the tone of the media outlet that's you're aiming for. So reading through past op-eds and other things in terms of what has gotten published there, what has worked, what's been popular, can also help give you a guide for that as well.
Thank you. Now, our final speaker is thanks to the post-COVID technology. We've got a pre-recorded talk from Dr. Travis Langley. And I'm told that there was a way that I'm supposed to do it. Okay, you took it.
Hello, Midwestern Psychological Association. Hello, Eric and company. I'm very sorry I am not there in person. I would love to be visiting the convention and hanging out with these fine folks. It's a matter of scheduling. We wound up being sandwiched between a speaking engagement on Wednesday and Thursday, a wedding anniversary on Saturday. If flight travel were more reliable, I still would have squeezed it in between, but I cannot. I am Travis Langley, Distinguished Professor of Psychology at Henderson State University, best known as author of the book Batman and Psychology, A Dark and Stormy Night. Editor, lead writer, head nerd of the herd on more than a dozen other books, anthologies that some members of this panel have written for, using the power of story to talk about real human nature, sharing psychology, discussing things we've learned about how people work, through stories that people find meaningful in modern lives. The university where I teach has given me a great deal of liberty and support for teaching in creative ways. The main things I teach throughout most of the year are social psychology, environmental psychology, forensic. But each spring I usually teach a junior or senior level review course using fictional examples to help students understand psychology better. Psychology and literature, science fiction. This semester, psychology and film again. 3 times it has been a special topics course called Batman. Just Batman. I did not have to disguise what I was teaching. Call it something like psychology of nocturnal vigilantism. All the students who wanted the word Batman on their transcripts were in that room, and the administrators supported what I was doing. There was a filmmaker who was going to ask the dean why she thought that was a good way to teach. Her response was she had no idea. She just trusted Travis to know how to teach psychology. Filmmaker Brett Cullen shot a documentary, Legends of the Night, about the power of story to inspire people, to teach us, to help us reflect on where we're going. In that first documentary he did, he specifically had examples of how Batman stories help people in their lives. A boy with cancer who called himself Batman, who wore the costume to feel strong while getting treated for leukemia. A young woman who'd been diagnosed with muscular dystrophy at age 3 and grew up wishing to wake up with superpowers. When she finally knew that would never happen, she decided, you know what? Batman doesn't have superpowers, he does just fine. Honestly, compared to so many of those examples, I felt a little out of place. Students and I were the first people who Brett interviewed the documentary, while his original fundraiser was still going on. It was only 2 weeks before the end of the semester, so it was better than ever. One student who appeared in the earlier slide, you see the back of her head in the lower right there, had parents who had scoffed when she first told them she was going to take a Batman class. Her mother wondered, is she ever going to graduate? Those parents visited the class. They sat in the back the day Brett recorded us for the documentary. So they saw how the class worked. They saw me teaching real psychology through fictional examples the students had read or watched throughout the term. And then they said, hey, Kyle, you understood what we were doing. Why stories? Stories are how people talk, how we organize information, how we persuade each other, how we share ideas. Political candidates each fight to control the narrative, the story that prompts people to take action to do what those politicians want, or to lose heart and stay home instead of voting against them. Engagement is crucial for active learning and information processing. In psychology, we do not just define classical conditioning. We tell people about Pavlov and the dogs. Not everybody gets why I write about psychology fictional character. One comparison I use makes the point for some. I remember in school having to calculate when two trains coming from different directions would reach each other. For a person who loves trains, that's a great way to learn math. For somebody who loves a particular story, that's a great way to learn psychology of the story. A soldier came up to me during the book signing at a convention. His PTSD included insomnia, survivor's guilt, and thoughts of killing himself. He told me Yoda saved his life. Something that character said in the movie The Empire Strikes Back spoke to him so strongly, he held on to it like someone else clutches an AA recovery chip when tempted to drink. Why include fiction when I want to share real psychology? Why not just the stories of real people? Stories of real people can be very powerful, yes. Why was it Yoda that saved that particular man instead of a real person's example? The right real story may very well have done it if he happened upon it. But Yoda was the one he knew. Why not stick to real people? There are reasons. There's consideration for others. I can talk about Batman or Buffy or many different fictional characters all I want. No matter what I say, they don't care. Their friends, enemies, associates do not care. I cannot hurt them and they cannot sue me. Somebody's public persona could be misleading. Some radio DJ might seem utterly narcissistic when it's really just an act for the masses. A mentally ill person might seem healthy. A healthy person might act like something is off because it amuses them or to scam insurance. And we have very strong ethical considerations when it comes to talking about judging anybody anyway, regardless of whether it's their public face or what we know about them. And we're not their therapist, and even if we are, we have some very strict things to say. And as a social psychologist, I'm repeatedly having to point out that I am not a therapist. But what I teach more than anything else is abnormal psychology. There are many reasons to be cautious when contemplating how any real human being fits a psychological concept. I'll give you one more reason. Real people can let you down in ways fictional characters cannot. If you don't like what Batman does in a certain movie, you can reject that depiction and say, that's not my Batman. But when a Tour de France champion gets caught doping and for having threatened those who had tried to out him before, you can't easily say, that's not my version of him. Those are some arguments against carelessly guessing about real individuals. So again, why fiction? Well, for one thing, reality can distract from truth. When I teach forensic psychology, some crimes we talk about are so brutal. Emotions that the students feel in response get in the way of what I'm trying to teach. A sheriff's deputy who visited my class 15 years ago showed gruesome crime scene photos. Students who took the class then remember those photos now. Just last week, one of them mentioned that to me. But they don't remember why he showed them those photos. They don't remember the point he was trying to make. Fiction has power. This gets quoted, I think, more than anything else I've ever written or said. Fiction with its great big question of what if is one of the most powerful forces in the world. Once upon a time, the ability to light a fire was fictitious. The structure of a story is mighty, but far mightier when it makes people wonder, what if? What if those characters did X or Y instead of Z? What if we could do Z? What if we look at our stories, past and present and new life, and find better directions for stories we have yet to live? Despite what I write about, I not just talk about fictional characters. In classroom lectures, I've talked mostly about real humans, and some non-humans. Fictional examples have certain advantages, but picture of fact, one way or another, we're telling stories that we're helping other people tell their own. So I'm additionally sorry that I'm not there for any kind of Q&A. I will answer a couple of things that have come up when people talk to me about these. How do you choose examples, or how do you get students interested in the examples? I don't tend to try to get them interested in examples. I work with examples that are meaningful to them. I show interest in them, find out what appeals to them, stories that are interesting to them, get them to initiate some examples. Talk about how characters interacted in a particular situation. Talk about whether something was realistic or not. You know, in someone's dating life, in a movie that they were watching. The things that are unrealistic also give us things to talk about. We're asking, it's like, what was it that was not true about that for you? The classes that I'll teach and the books that I write are using specific examples, such as Batman, The Walking Dead, very difficult one coming up, The Handmaid's Tale. The people who choose those classes, the people who choose those books, are already open to using those particular topics. So those aren't to reach everybody. Those are to use in those particular situations. I commented one time when visiting a university in Illinois. I was visiting with some faculty members who wanted to know a little bit more about what I do. Some people from a number of areas. A sociology professor in particular was talking to me. And I mentioned that there's no one story that your whole audience knows. There's no one particular movie or TV show that speaks to all of them. There's none that they all know. And the sociologist said, well, they all know Star Wars. No, I guarantee you they do. You surveyed your class guests. How many of you have seen Star Wars? I didn't specify which one we mean, and not every hand will go up. To me, story is a wonderful way to make a point. I led by telling you the story. I didn't just apologize for not being here. I led by telling you the story of why I'm not there. And now I'm telling the story. I'm not telling the story earlier on. So I have to pass this on to my other colleagues and say, I miss you all. Well, meeting is over. Thank you.
I'll allow myself the last word. So I want to thank all of my colleagues again for spending their time providing their expertise. Just like the word expert, but their knowledge, their experiences, and I love working with them. I love being inspired by and learning from them. I hope that, just like me, many of you walk away with something thinking about how you might tell your story and communicate your knowledge to others, right? Whether it be students, press, what have you. And as we go forward and become professors, leaders, etc., we work more intentionally at including things like this into the training of the younger generations. Just as I asked all of my colleagues to put up their social media type things, and myself, it's like I'm on Twitter, Twitter. I did get on Instagram. I'm slowly but surely learning how to use it. Dr. Jordan inspired me and encouraged me to create my own YouTube channel where I do some similar things. And I also work with my local independent theater to film programs, do film programming, and I usually introduce the films and talk a little bit about the psychology that I see relevant in there to, again, speak to a different type of audience who might not normally hear what we have to say. So thank you all very much for your time. These fine people, I'm sure, will be willing to ask you, to answer your questions, maybe ask you questions too. Please enjoy the rest of your conference.